Thank you so much for being here. We have just some outstanding panelists for you. We have Danielle Allison, who runs Miss JD. She's the CEO there and does incredible work lifting up women throughout the legal ecosystem. Thank you so much for being here, Danielle. We have Kathi Vidal, who's managing partner of Silicon Valley for Winston and Strawn, and just this morning put out an incredible article on how to show up as a leader in wellness and belonging. And I'll share that after as well with the notes from today's session, just in case anyone missed it, but you can check it out on LinkedIn. And the way she runs her team, you'll find out more about how she's doing that here. And Matt Fawcett, who's Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary of NetApp, and responsible for all legal affairs worldwide, including corporate governance and securities law, IP, contracts, and M&A, and has overseen development of NetApp legal into a global high-performance organization with a unique commitment to innovation and transformation. If you don't follow these three on LinkedIn, you should, because they do put out incredible insights on innovation and kindness and well-being. Matt did a series last June,
yeah, that's right.
with Dr. Larry Richards on JD Supra on wellness and legal. So there are a lot of really great articles that you can check out and read from our three awesome panelists. So thank you so much for being here. I'll get started and ask each of you to just share a little bit more about your roles, kind of what has changed most for you, and the team dynamic that you have in this current situation. So Danielle, will you go first?
Sure. So as Monica mentioned, I'm the CEO of Miss JD, and just for background, we're a national nonprofit that provides programming and support to foster the professional development and success of women attorneys. And we start with those in the pipeline, pre-law students and law students, and then target those who are in the early years of their profession, so early career attorneys who just entered the profession. And so for us, we are all, as a team, we were already remote. We are incorporated in California, but we all work all over the country. I'm actually in Alabama. And so in terms of how we work together as a team, recent events haven't adjusted that so much as it has how we deliver our programming to our community. We had an annual conference that was planned in Chicago from March the 13th. And in a matter of days, we switched that to a virtual conference. We have some in-person programming that we've had to cancel and adjust and reflect on how is the best way in this environment for us to deliver that content and that support to the members of our community, because we still have law students who are anticipating, what does this mean for my summer associate position? What does this mean for me studying for the bar? For early career associates, what does this mean for me in my job or preparing for the job market? And so for us as an organization, we've been looking at ways that we can provide that support, kind of in this new dynamic that we have with COVID-19.
Thanks. Kathi?
So I manage the Silicon Valley office for Winston and Strawn. I'm also on our executive committee. And I play other leadership roles as well in terms of our patent litigation practice, in terms of diversity and inclusion within the firm. And before COVID-19 hit, I was constantly on the road, either going to court for cases, accepting speaking engagements. Even within the firm, we really believe in connection amongst people. So all of our executive committee meetings are in person. That's once a month. We have invitations outstanding all the time to go to our different offices and connect and bond more. So I would say that I was probably on 4 to 5 flights a week at a minimum. And, to me, since we're remote, it's really freed up that time to connect in more meaningful ways. And that's been done at a firm level. So as soon as we knew this was going to be something real, we actually got all of our executive committee members on a video conference, which we had never done from home, on a Saturday, so that we could all talk about what this would mean and how life was going to change. And it was great because that just set the precedent really early on for doing these kind of calls and connection. In terms of how things are changed, I've done a lot to make sure that I'm more in contact with people. I've started hosting associate get-togethers once a week where there's 50 to 100 associates invited, and we just check in, We talk about what's going on, some of it COVID related, some of it family related, some of it work related. And so I've been doing much more of that, throughout my teams, the office as well. We meet once a week by video, and we have other, games and things we do as well. So it's really been about connecting in new ways.
Thanks. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Monica, and thanks for having me today. I work at NetApp. NetApp is, a fairly large company, a global company that makes data management and data storage solutions for all kinds of industries. And I've been there almost 10 years. And there's, thinking about kind of the right now, one thing that I think is very helpful for us, for our team, for our company going through this is that we really do have a mission that is tied to the successful outcome of this crisis. We supply, the stuff that helps hospitals manage their data, the stuff that lets the financial industry manage their data, the stuff that lets governments manage their data. So, there's a lot of passion and inspiration within our entire company and our legal team to keep going, right? And we are critical infrastructure and an essential business by any definition around the world. So we have people who are working, and we have people who are out in the field working, right? One of our first things was getting safe passage letters for our 1,000 service and support people so they can actually be on the ground. So in that sense, there's been a rallying cry in many ways for extending the mission. But obviously huge challenges, right? The anxiety and the stress. And from, I consider myself part of kind of two teams at NetApp. One is the legal team that I lead, obviously. And we are highly distributed. So we've been accustomed to working remotely because we sit in something like 30 different offices around the world. In many cases, just one or two people in an office from the legal team. So from an adjustment standpoint, we're doing pretty well there. But the other team is the executive team, the CEO staff. And I think in both cases, the biggest change, before getting into like nitty gritty of things that we're actually trying to implement, I think the biggest change is our planning cycles are super short, right? We're at the end of our fiscal year, where right now we would have already done our planning cycle for fiscal 21, which will start in May. And we would have a very strong point of view on each quarter for the next 4 quarters. And right now, any planning cycle that's longer than literally a couple of weeks is probably not worth the paper it's written on. So we've had to adjust both to the challenge and stress of planning cycles that are really short, and as a publicly traded company, obviously, the extreme interest from the analyst community and our shareholders on what does your future look like, and how do you communicate and balance kind of all of those different competing concerns. So that's what we're wrestling with right now.
Thanks. Something that really stood out for me in one of the interviews you did with Dr. Larry Richards was that the legal industry is one of the loneliest industries. And I think about that now because I have seen that, in fact, this most unusual time has given us more permission to create space for more humanity. And I wonder if maybe that has shifted, where now we can actually reach out to people on a deeper level. What are you seeing?
Well, I'd love to hear what Kathi and Danielle have to say about that too. I mean, from my point of view, one thing that our team has always done really well, in part because we are so distributed, right? We made a conscious decision to put our people close to our clients. And because of that decision, one of the aftershocks is we have to work extra hard to feel like a cohesive team. So I think we have pretty good routines that create that connection and help stymie some of the loneliness that can happen, especially in an in-house world where, I remember a million years ago being in a law firm where I was surrounded by other lawyers. And so we had common language and connection just by virtue of that. And that doesn't exist in the corporate world so much. So we had to compensate for that, and we've done a good job. But putting that aside, I totally agree. The fact that we're all working from home, and that probably 90% of the people on our team who are working from home either have a spouse working from home, or kids who are also schooling from home, or pets that want to come into the picture. I mean, we have given ourselves more permission to show our humanity. And I was joking with you guys earlier. I mean, today gave me an excuse to put on a clean shirt. But I will tell you, I've been in Zoom calls constantly for the last several days where I have a cap and a dirty t-shirt on because I just haven't gotten to the bath, and that's okay, right? Everyone's kind of relaxed and given each other permission to behave like that.
Yeah, to Matt's point, our team, as I mentioned, is already very much spread out. So we have a culture of starting board meetings and staff calls with, how are you doing? What's going on? Just generally checking in so that people feel connected, because that's the only way we can kind of create connection beyond, being in person with one another. But I definitely think that to the extent folks who are trying to create this for their teams, if they haven't already, just showing up as your authentic self, which will encourage those who you are leading to show up as their authentic selves, definitely helps with the loneliness piece, to feel like I am not, I have my work, but then outside of the work call, I'm in this like lonely life by myself and kind of dealing with these challenges alone. And just to show, no, we actually all are dealing with these challenges. We're all having to figure this out. We're in it together.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think this is all working really well at a macro level. I think we went into this with every individual kind of orbiting around their own center. And as we've moved forward, we've formed different common centers, whether it's the work environment, the team environment, the family environment. So I think on the macro level, this has been very good for connection and communication. The thing that I think we also need to take into consideration is the micro level, that, pay attention to who's attending those calls. If people are not attending, are you checking in with them? Are you generally checking in with people on your team to make sure that the ones who are really lonely and who may be isolating, that they're engaged and they're heard? So that's where I think we could all be intentional and make sure that we're including everyone in that.
Mm-hmm. Kathi, you had said something on the prep call about how you make space for people at the table since we're not there in person. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the pauses and the things that you're doing to make sure that you're increasing diversity of voice?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And that's something that I noticed from our executive committee when I came in the door at Winston, which was about 3 years ago. So we have a very large executive committee. And the one thing I noticed is once something comes up for a vote or something is mentioned, there's a pause. And to me, the pause means that it gives some space for everybody to chime in. Because what I have experienced in the past in different environments is there are some people who are going to be eager and they'll speak over somebody. I mean, we all know this as lawyers. You speak over someone a little bit at the end of what they're saying so that you can be the next speaker. Some people are more adept at that than others. But when you actually create a pause, you hear different voices. And I noticed that when the pause was created in our executive committee meetings, what it resulted in was that at least half of the voices heard were diverse. And I don't think that would happen if there was not a pause, not by anyone's fault. I just think there's a different dynamic in how people speak, and that allows everybody, no matter what their style, to chime in. So that is something that I've tried to incorporate, especially now even more than before, because anxieties are high. And one of the things psychologists say helps people is for them to take ownership and to play a larger role, to be able to control aspects of their environment. And so if they're just on a video call and I'm the only one speaking and I'm not pausing enough and letting them take over the conversation, take over the initiatives, they're not going to have that, that autonomy that to me not only makes them more excited, engaged, and passionate, but also keeps them well.
Yeah, I put up the well-being pledge for legal employers from the ABA. So it's not new, and yet the conversations are increasing, and I'm really glad to see that. I hope that as we evolve in learning how to work remotely and creating space for new conversations, that we're really focused on wellness. This was also in one of your interviews, Matt, but not as the icing, but actually the cake, right? That actually when you create space for happy people, they are more productive. And a big part of that we talked about together was making sure that people know that they're valuable and that their value is seen. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. this might go down a dark path for a moment, but I'll try to recover, because I have kind of a specific reaction to this thing. But interestingly, you just mentioned happiness, which I think is a real important concept, and one that has been underserved. Just the notion of happiness. And in the many feeds I was reading before this call, literally half an hour ago, I clicked on one of the articles that said happy people are harder to kill. So that kind of puts it out there, right? So I think that's true. The well-being pledge, I read it a couple more times over the last couple days, and my reaction to it is it feels kind of limp and uninspired, to be honest.
Yep.
I'm not sure it really gets at the thing, and I try to take myself back to my 25-year-old self when I was entering the workforce and thinking, if this was presented to me by a firm that was recruiting and saying, we're really behind this well-being pledge. I mean, I worked at firms, and I don't think I ever went to a firm event where alcohol was served, but alternatives were not. I don't think I ever went to an event where, there was like extreme pressure for like significant alcohol intake, although lots of people had alcohol. And a lot of these others are kind of a firm providing access and resource. And I would suspect if Kathi went through all these, I bet Winston has been doing, and these are kind of low bars in my mind. So, but at the same time, I'm like, well, how would I do it better? I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is. I also don't know what, I'm going to speak for Kathi as a manager of a gigantic law firm. I don't know what her or her firm's responsibility is relative to the responsibility of each of us individually. In crisis, and we are clearly in crisis right now, I'm very optimistic, because I think institutions and people and teams and firms do rally to deal with the crisis in the moment. And frankly, lawyers in general, who are kind of conditioned to think about worst case scenarios and risk mitigation, are probably pretty good at running to a fire. I mean, I'm seeing that in my team every single day. I'm sure Danielle and Kathi are seeing that with their teams too. So I'm kind of an optimist around what's happening right now, but this will be over one day, and life at some point will re-normalize, I think and hope. And when that happens, I'm not super optimistic that this pledge, no matter how sincerely people want to embrace it, is really going to be the path to solving the real mental health and depression and substance abuse challenges that our industry has. But I also don't have a better answer, so who am I to criticize?
I would just add to that, Matt and Monica, that to me this gets back to my macro micro point, that to me this is a macro solution, and I'm glad that Matt and I, and I'm sure maybe Danielle as well, see this as unremarkable. That means we have evolved institutions where this is the norm and this is what we are offering to everyone. There may be other institutions that would benefit from that because they're not providing those offerings. They're not providing mindfulness training and all the resources that some of the other firms and institutions are. To me, what is really going to engage people is just connection on a one-on-one level, and all of these concepts being employed more on a micro level, on individual check-ins, on each individual person focusing on wellness. And so I think what we had before, and I'm a nerd, so Venn diagrams, it's there's a part of the firm that takes care of wellness. We have that part. They have a lot of great offerings. And I know a lot of people avail themselves of that. And then there was management, and that was a different circle in the Venn diagram, and there was no intersection. What I think this COVID-19 has done is it's caused those to at least merge where there's intersection, so that on every management call, we now talk about wellness. In every communication, you start out with, I hope you're well. I think we could do more in that regard, and just make sure that, as I said, that we're really taking care of each person and encouraging each other to do that, to check in more one-on-one, to make sure that everyone is happy, that everyone is passionate and thriving. So to me, that's the way that this could be improved, is great to have all the institutional stuff. It's necessary, it's important. People avail themselves of that. But I agree with Matt that we could really take this one step further.
Mm-hmm. I shared an example with all of you how I was at a firm, Zuckerman Spader in Washington, D.C. many years ago. And Roger Zuckerman would walk in every morning and say, Monica, thank you for that thing you did, right? And it was so impressive to me that here the founder, owner of this firm would come in and tell me, the marketing director, how great I was doing and how it was meaningful to him. And I think that all of you, when you look at that pledge, you can make improvements to it, right? And that's one thing is intentional leadership. How do you show up and show others that you want them there, that they matter, that you see them? And that's so important to wellness. Is like, I think of like that loneliness, the belonging, the autonomy, all these things that make showing up to work fun, happy people, is having leaders who recognize us.
Well, and can I just add on that? Because one thing I love about these types of sessions is just coming away with different people's practices that I then want to adopt. And so one of the things that I've done in the past that I think has been helpful is I will ask other leaders to communicate directly with associates or others or clients. You know, I had an African-American associate write most of an appellate brief for me. So instead of just telling him he did a good job, I wrote to my client and I said, and he's allowed me to use his name, Sean Suber wrote this draft and I did very little editing on it. And so then the client reached out to Sean and said, you know, we very much value you. That was fantastic work. We appreciate all you put into that. So I think not only can we do this ourselves, we can in a nice way encourage each other to do it as well.
Yes, for sure. I was just going to add, you know, a lot of times, especially when you're working remotely and you're the person who kind of is the front facing person for whatever the assignment or the project is, it's very easy to, you know, collect that credit, like a great job, or that program turned out really well. And to, you know, be very proactive in saying, oh, you know, thank you, but it was a team effort, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so was really vital. And, you know, making that come to fruition. I feel like that for the person on the other end, they can see the value in their contribution to, you know, whatever the end result was. And also it encourages others to see and to recognize, you know, who's helping them. We're not all doing anything, you know, by ourselves. And so I try to do that, you know, obviously as a CEO, a lot of times whenever anything goes well, it's, you know, Danielle, great job on that. But I have a team that very much helps, and there's no way that these things would work out without their input and their efforts. And so I definitely try to recognize that, you know, on the receiving end, and put that in my board reports and, you know, give them kind of a shout out publicly to let others know what they're doing.
How do we distinguish between autonomy and working alone now?
I think one thing we could do is, which we've kind of already hit on, but I think it's just in the check-in process. I don't think, I mean, autonomy to complete the assignment, to, you know, be trusted with the work, but that doesn't prevent me from checking in on you and just like, how are you? How are things going? If you didn't call in to the last call, just want to make sure everything's okay, because things are changing so rapidly in everyone's lives day to day. So today, you know, thank you. I'm very thankful. No one in my direct family has been affected by this. I don't know what tomorrow brings. And so, you know, I think it's just showing that you're available and that you are caring about what's going on, but at the same time, not micromanaging. I think, you know, just checking in on people in small ways could make a difference.
Yeah, I would just echo what Danielle said, that, you know, when people have autonomy to complete a project, that doesn't mean they're just left alone across all verticals, right? There's lots of ways that we can engage, whether it's through training, through one-on-one checking in, through involving them in other group discussions about other topics. So, you know, to me, autonomy doesn't mean there you are, you know, go off on your own. It means you've got the authority, you've got control, which is so important, as I mentioned, in this environment, to, you know, take lead on something, and, you know, let me know if you need help, but you've got, you know, you're in charge of this. And then, like Danielle said, the check-ins are great, and then also just getting them involved in other, you know, in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we can always take some time to remind ourselves that in the roles we have, they are inherently tied to the outcomes of our clients, right? And in that sense, while we might be working for a period of time on something by ourselves, it is always connected to something, whether you're an in-house lawyer or an outside lawyer or a public service lawyer, you're representing clients who have needs. And many times those needs are, noble in some ways. I mean, I've spoken about, the mission for NetApp that I'm very passionate about. And I've shared that with my team, and I know some of my team are on this call, so they'll keep me honest. But I hope I've shared that with them too, and I hope they feel that as well. And so we, not just our team, but our company, now is routinely just sharing these heroic stories of people in the company. I mean, just one quick example: we had a customer in Washington D.C. whose environment needed some software upgrades. They didn't know how to do it. The engineers were in like shelter in place in Texas. 2 engineers got in a car and drove to Washington, D.C. that day. Wow. Just drove until they got there, got into the environment, and spent 2 days getting this customer up and running again. And when you see and hear and think about the passion and commitment that other people have for the institution that you're part of, I think it just makes you really excited and passionate too. And so even in the times where, I feel like it's Groundhog Day now. We're in the Groundhog Day phase of this, where I don't even know what day it is anymore. But if just take literally 5 minutes to remember the mission that we're on and that we're in service to our clients, that makes me feel connected, even if I'm working on stuff just by myself.
And I would just add to that I do think, Matt, that's a really important point. And our clients aren't just the business goals of our clients. It's also the persons, the individuals who are going through this very same thing as well. And, from our perspective, our clients have many more needs now. Not only do they now have needs on the home front, needs for health and safety, even within their roles, within their organizations, a lot of our clients are folks like Matt, who the work on their plate has expanded dramatically, and they've had to find new ways of doing things. So I think working with the team and helping them to recognize that, the reasons that we're doing certain things, the reasons why we want to get more predictable in terms of when we send our input to the client, the reasons we want to not barrage them with too much information, it's all because they are people, and that we care about them as people as much as the companies, and we want to make sure we're doing what we can to serve them. And that in and of itself not only helps them, but to me, being in service of something bigger than yourself also helps with wellness.
Yeah. So I'm a life coach, and I find that I have conversations with people across the legal industry every day who've never had access to life coaching. And the 3 of you are fortunate to be leaders in organizations that not only allow for this to happen, but encourage these conversations. And that's why you're here. We do have a question from Adam Hopkins, who says, he's in a boutique firm, and leadership will probably say they don't have capabilities, resources to introduce these wellness ideas. And I think that he's not alone. There are a lot of entities across the US and even globally where these wellness resources are like the icing. They're like a nice to have. Oh, sure, we have it, but maybe you're not even encouraged to use it, or maybe it's not even there, or maybe it's available. Typically, I find coaching is available only for the executive team. And then how do you create space for people across the organization to thrive, especially in times like this where they're showing up, they're working hard, they don't want to lose their job, they're full of anxiety, they have new criteria at home, and it's hard, right? And so I would say now more than ever it's needed. And how do we help people in organizations that don't have leaders like the 3 of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely sympathetic to Adam's comment, and I think he's right. I mean, not everyone has the same scale to afford the same kinds of resources, whether there's passion to do that or not. And I also think, as a person who, I've worked with coaches before, and maybe that attuned me to it, but the tremendous amount of resources that are free and out there and useful is pretty fantastic in my mind. And maybe there's a way we can deliver, some. But I also think, especially in the world we're in right now, separating signal from noise is really hard. So that's the challenge, I think, because there's so much that's available, but finding the things that work for you is really challenging. But I'll also say, with a little grit and a little ingenuity, you can find stuff, and it can be affordable. So we have people on my team who are working, and not the senior people, but people who like raise their hand and want to do like a year of coaching. There are people who are getting like their life coaching certifications and degrees, and they have to get hours to do that, right? And those hours they have to do for free. And so we've got a few people working with granted, people who are still learning the art and the craft of being a life coach, but they're learning and they're engaging. And so there's, you know, there are things, and I'll see if I can figure a little more detail to provide it, but there are opportunities to get some free coaching assistance. And I think that's valuable because it lets you express how you're thinking and you get some feedback, and it's a safe place to do it. And I'm a big fan.
Yeah. So I'm a coach for the coaching fellowship, and we offer pro bono coaching to women leaders. And that's one resource for women. There are others. And someone on the last webinar asked if we could do this more often. So I will be opening up my Zoom line. I'll post it on my website. And so if people would like to call in, I'll have those times listed. And it's just a drop-in, so there's no agenda, but we'll be compassionate and showing up for each other. So check that out. Kathi?
Oh, first of all, I love that, Monica, and I might join as well and see if I can help and learn. So I think that's a fantastic idea. You know, in terms of resources, you know, I noticed that early on when people were starting to work at home and were really struggling with the kids and activities for them to do. So I posted some collateral on LinkedIn. I gathered a lot of that collateral from the firm. So within the firm, we not only have our COVID-19 task force, which is dealing with all the legal issues and trying to help our clients with that. Separately, we have a COVID-19 group that their sole dedication is to the health and well-being of everybody at Winston. And so we've got a lot of resources internally. I will talk to the firm about whether there's any way to get that out in some more formal fashion. But for now, I will, Adam, I'm going to go through that site today, a little bit later today. I've got a brief to edit first, but I will go through that site today and pull any of the external resources, because we've done the hard work of separating the signal from the noise, to use Matt's expression. And so to the extent we've found those resources, I will post them in a LinkedIn post so that everybody knows where they are and how to link to them quickly.
Great.
Awesome. Kathi, I'll connect with you outside of this, because there may be an opportunity where we could share some of those on the Miss JD blog also and share them more broadly.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'm happy to share anything.
There's another question from Petra van Hilst, who's the founder of General Counsel Netherlands. Welcome, Petra. And she asks, how do you stay sane in this crisis and still be happy in 4 months' time?
So I can tell you one of my thoughts on staying sane, and that's that I calendar time for people so that I can create time for me. And so, you know, having family at home, instead of feeling like I'm constantly trying to balance and everybody's saying, you know, when can we do this? When can we do that? What we do is we'll post something on the fridge, and, you know, depending upon the day, I may have 15 minutes, I may have more than that, but that would be my time with the person. And I find that especially with younger kids, they look forward to that time even more than had we checked in on and off during the day. And for me, it's almost as there's a negative implication to that, which is all the rest of the day is mine. It's for my clients, it's for people at work I'm trying to serve. So that's just one tip that I found has really helped me have more structure and give more, but by reserving more.
One tip for me is I've just tried to give myself a lot of grace in my household. And I'm a very type A person, and I've seen a lot of literature on, you know, setting a schedule and having a schedule. And so we were doing a whole homeschool routine for a couple of weeks. And then I said, we're taking Fridays off. You know, it's too much. You know, by the time we get to Friday, we're all mentally exhausted. And so for my daughter, who's 8, my oldest child, you know, we do a couple of activities in the morning, and then Friday is just like a release day. And I think that just being flexible with yourself and not feeling like, you know, I was committed to this and this is what I'm doing. Well, if it's not working, it's not working, and, you know, try something new. To Kathy's point, she looks forward to, like, Friday is her movie day. She gets to, like, watch movies in our bed on Friday. And she has a whole plan of having sugar cookies, and it's become like a thing. And I think creating, you know, that's for her 8-year-old, but creating whatever that is for you, you know, that you're going to reward yourself with at the end of the week or the end of the whatever your cycle is, just to have something to look forward to, the small things that you can do in this time that, you know, bring you some happiness.
Yeah, I mean, those are great. And I realized, I kind of started this session today talking about how our planning cycles are super compressed. So thinking out 4 months is a little bit challenging right now for me, Petra. But, you know, in addition to what Danielle and Kathi said, you know, for my own sanity, if you could see my calendar each day, besides the fact that it's like double and triple booked with stuff, you will always see a section that says EWO, which is code for executive workout, which is, you know, 90 minutes to 2 hours. It might be way early in the morning. It might be way late. It might be in the middle of the day if I have a block. But that's just my block of time where I'll go outside and take a walk, or I'll watch TV, or I'll do nothing. And that's, you know, the kind of gift to myself to try to stay centered. But it's frankly, it's also a gift to the people who are sheltering in my small condo with me, because if I didn't do that, they would be miserable as well as me. So I think they both hit on the idea of giving each other permission not to be our best in every instance, right? And asking for permission from others to not always be your best, I think, is important. And the act of verbalizing that, to me, just helps make it more real. So, Petra, I hope in 4 months we'll all be happy, but who knows? And I'm just trying to get us to there right now.
And Monica, can I mention one other thing that I put this in the article I wrote this morning. So the title of the article was "Everything You Need to Know to Lead Through COVID-19 You Learned in Kindergarten." And the one that I thought about that has really helped me maintain balance is, you know, you need recess and art in every day. And so, you know, to me, that's something that, to Matt's point of setting aside that time, to me, setting aside time where you are getting out, you're taking a walk, you're doing whatever you can that's your recess, and it's going to be different for other people, is important. And then even remembering the art part of things, that, you know, to me, the art is more creative, less structured. It helps work a different part of our brain and gives us more sanity. And I know, Monica, you had mentioned before the 100-day project, which is only, I think, on day 3 right now. But folks can join that, and it's a great 100-day art project where people just commit for 100 days to doing something, whether it's drawing or, you know, I do photography. But it's a nice way to just remind yourself that there are those other aspects of life that just continue to exist through this.
Mm-hmm. Kathi, tell us about the barbell effect that you talked about earlier.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to punt to somebody else on that one.
Okay, all right. We'll talk about the reset button, because we had talked about this before, where you know, maybe it's not, you know, teams haven't done this before. And I think I mentioned this on the last webinar, but I think it's really important to mention again, which is that we're not working from home. We are stuck at home, and we are trying to find a way to continue to work with very different circumstances than what we're used to having. And it is stressful. And so we have to be aware of our own personal emotions and just acknowledging those. As a coach, I do a lot of naming emotions, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be happy, and it's okay to laugh. And we don't have to be like, oh my gosh, the world's ending, doom and gloom. And if you are feeling that, then take a break, right? And so I think that for teams that didn't have this normal, the 3 of you have, in terms of being great leaders, having this ability to work remotely, getting in place really quickly, that maybe this is a good time to say, hey, you know what, we weren't doing it right, but we can do it right now. And we can just press that giant reset button, and we can say, like, what do we need from each other? What do we want to give to each other? And I think you mentioned this in your article, Kathi, but how do we want to come out of this, right? When we look back on who led beautifully during this time that was really changing the world. This is going to change the world in so many ways. How do we want to look upon the leaders who took action and made a difference for the rest of us? And
well,
that's impossible for any of us to do.
Yeah, and I think before this, everybody was stuck in their routine and their standard way of doing things. And, you know, you'd hear people talk about being present and being intentional, and, you know, from everything from the way you lead to diversity and inclusion, that we were really encouraging everybody to really think more about their actions and their teams and their people. This has been a forcing function for that. And so I'm hoping that as people have had to rethink things and not just, rotely go forward with the ways they've always done things, that we will find ways to improve, and we will find ways to connect more deeply, and, to have more joy for ourselves and to create more joy for others. So I do think that there's a lot of things that will come out of this. The fact that it's longer than 30 days means all the stuff we're doing right now, all the stuff that we're practicing is now going to become a habit. So I'm hoping those habits stick.
Yeah, I might have been the person that used the barbell analogy. And again, maybe I'm going to be the wet blanket on all of this. But I don't have the answer. It's just my own thing. But I think about, just the famous quote that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals character. And I think this extreme experience is going to prove that saying out. And that's where I think the barbell, in my mind, comes in. If you think about kind of two ends, I think teams that have trust and vulnerability and worked well coming into this are going to thrive coming through it. And I worry that the teams that haven't built that are really going to struggle to try to create any semblance of better teamwork through the crisis, in part because it won't feel authentic. And I think from a leadership perspective, if I came in saying, hey, we were bad at X, Y, and Z, but we're going to use this as our opportunity to create a good X, Y, and Z, I don't think that would come off very well, and I don't think it would be effective. But for teams that are struggling, I'd love it if that could be a forcing function. I just don't have a ton of optimism, unfortunately, for that. But kind of the longer this lasts, maybe the more likely we are to really think about new ways to engage. I think we're leveraging the goodness of the old ways we've engaged historically. Maybe some new ideas are really going to sprout up as this goes on.
Kathi, how do you make sure that attorneys at the firm aren't working too much?
So, first of all, the check-ins to me are the best way. And so what I've started doing is every day I try and do a 15-minute check-in with at least 2 associates by video, so that I can talk to them about what they're working on. I can help them with strategies. I also, as I mentioned, I have those associate video calls now once a week. And the last week I talked to them about workflow and told them that I am happy to intervene in any of their cases across the firm if they feel like they've got too much going on, if they're having a hard time balancing. And then I also told them ways that they could do it themselves, where if somebody asks them to do something, of course they want to say yes, but they can say, yes, I can do that. Looking at my calendar, it would be next Friday. Is that going to work for you? Or to say, yes, I can do that. I'm spending 90% of my time on Kathi's cases, so I have 10%, which would be the equivalent of 30 hours. Is that going to be workable for you? And I didn't do the math, so I don't know if 30% is the right percentage. But to me, those are some of the things that that I've seen have been pretty successful in terms of making sure people aren't working that hard. And then also, those of us in management can keep a look on hours, making sure that not only are people not working too hard, but that they're getting enough work, because that can be even more stressful in a law firm than working too hard. So I've just tried to engage across the board to check in with folks to make sure that all that's happening the right way. And it's not perfect. And if anybody has other ideas, I would certainly welcome those as well.
I have one thing that I've tried to implement more of. So now that we're all working from home, a couple of conditions happen. One is you don't have the quick water cooler experiences where you could drop in and someone say, hey, did you get to that? Or are you working on that? Or do I have that? And so those little exchanges, which would in a normal world just feel like the minor, not irritating, casual, have converted now into emails. And our lives are now, a lot of our workflow is now governed by emails we're either sending or receiving. And so if I would normally have 15 casual check-ins in the course of a day, if those are 15 emails, people receiving those are going to say, here's another thing I got to do. So I'm now very explicitly putting not urgent or don't need today in the subject line of the email. And I'm sure a lot of people have already been doing this for years and are really good at it. But I've just realized that when a leader in a company sends an email out, it carries the assumption of urgency. So I try to take that out for people. So because I know that they're working on a million other things.
I think that's.
Go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that's great. I think your team probably really appreciates that. And I think also we're all kind of working at, whatever time frame works for you. And so if you're sending an email at midnight, I think it's good to say, hey, I'm just up working. Please don't feel like you need to respond. And that's just when I had availability, because it can also give the impression that like, oh, Kathy's working or Matt's working, until 1 a.m. I need to be doing the same thing, and just being clear about, no, this is just, what I'm doing today, or this is my schedule, but this is not my expectation for you and your work time.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and I would just add to that one trick that I sometimes do is the delayed send an email. So for some people, it's great to say, this is not urgent. For other people, because I feel like the solution in this time, it has to be individualized. So some of my partners get excited when I email them at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I just got up from my day and they're ending their day. They think it's kind of a bonding that we're passing the baton on, and we've got 24-hour coverage because you all crash at 7, but I wake up really early. So some of them love that. Some of them, like I'm now going to do the daily check-in with my team. I wrote that at 5 in the morning after I wrote the article, and I delayed send it till 8 a.m. so that people didn't see something and think, okay, now I want to respond, or now I have to work. So that's another tool folks can use.
Yeah, that's a great one. It does have, it can have a pernicious effect though, because I work every day. I love what I do. And so I might have 100 emails queued up over the weekend that are all landing on people on Monday morning. Watch out for that impact as well. But one of the things we talk about, and have talked about for years on our team, again, because we're distributed, and nowadays everyone's distributed, is we have to be really good at passing the ball in the dark. That's the expression we use. Very few things happen with just one person touching them, right? And oftentimes, and especially now, it's happening, somebody needs something in Singapore, they need to pass it to Paris. The Paris person needs to pass it to New York. And so I think having set the expectation that we want to be good at passing the ball in the dark implies that there will be dark, right? And that implies that there is permission for people to receive something at a weird time and know that they don't have to get back to it right away. At least I hope that's the case.
Yeah. Danielle, are you hearing any concerns in particular from law students or younger associates?
Well, obviously, concerns that I think we all are aware of, just the uncertainty of the crisis and its implications and what that means for their careers, for their summer job, for their summer associate positions, for am I going to still be at my firm? Am I about to take a major pay cut? And as we discussed on our prep call, some of those questions can't really be answered necessarily, but just keeping the lines of communication open, I think are good. And I think every day there's more news, but already some firms have announced things that they're doing. And so I think that as long as it doesn't feel like I'm kind of working in a secret society and they're making plans for me over here, but I don't know what they are, and they could come down any day in a firm-wide email. I just think that having people prepared for that, taking the secrecy off of it that sometimes law firms can function in, from my experience. And also, if there is a decision made, just being clear about, this is an economic decision. This is not a reflection of you as an attorney, not letting it be a black mark on someone's, record or career if they, have to be furloughed or let go. So,
that's a great point about transparency. And across the board, I think that the whole idea of, like an annual performance review is outdated. And I know most of us have shifted away from that for some time, but there are still some organizations that do that. And so using this time to really be transparent and talk to people about the value they have, what's important, what's meaningful, and what you're expecting, right? How are you seeing that shape what's happening right now? Kathi, Matt.
Yeah, I can talk to my own personal experiences, which is as this first started evolving, I tried to make sure that I was more in communication with people about work product, to make sure that I was mentoring them more, not only in other areas, but in terms of producing great work product. And so, I have, like I mentioned, tried to scale that with these associate meetings. But what I do is I will edit a brief, and then I will ask the associates permission, and then I will sit through with whoever wants to join of the associates that I've invited, and anyone at Winston, if you're listening, you're welcome to join that. I'll just step through and, this is why I made this change. And, it may be, okay, we're talking about initial disclosures in a litigation, but we have to consider, are we going to move to transfer, and who are we listing in those? So here's the big picture strategy that the leads on your team are thinking of. And then here's other things about, readability, that we did that last week, about, maybe using tools to check readability. And I invited everyone that I'd send them a book on writing to win if they would like to read it. So, so I just think being more engaged on that, because you can't just stop by their office. You can't, say, hey, good job on that brief, and I think just sending work product back and forth by email is even more impersonal now. I mean, it was always impersonal, but I think it feels much more impersonal now than it ever has, and people have more of a need for connection. So actually delivering that feedback through video or on the phone, I think is much more important.
I think that's great, Kathi. I just want to say.
Yeah, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes on some things I need to start doing. Maybe because we're fortunate, in our planning cycle and our company cycle, right? We're at the very end of our fiscal year right now, and one of the things that we do kind of at this time is what we call talent review, and that's an opportunity where it's kind of a shared thing. So every single person on my team is evaluated and discussed by a group, and that feedback is then provided to each individual. And each of us is right now in the process not only of thinking about our own self-assessment on how the year went, but also what we want to accomplish next year. And I think it's a little more challenging right now for us to all be thinking about what are our fiscal 21 goals developmentally and personally, but I'm happy to force us to wrestle with that, because I think it does force us to think out. And, one of my colleagues yesterday said it this way, so she said it better than me, but it's hard to be thinking about fiscal 21 talent review and growth and development and planning, but it's a good thing too. It feels like I'm doing a healthy thing for the organization and for the team, and even though it's a little harder, it'll probably pay off even better.
Yeah. So many great points. If anyone has a question, you can put it in the chat. We're going to have Michelle Silverthorne on next Monday and talking more about really being intentional around as we go forward, making sure that we retain diverse talent. And so this conversation is really important to me in terms of how we're making decisions and the transparency that you mentioned, Kathi. I think it's phenomenal that you give your team an insight into how decisions are made and what's important, because when you don't know, it's hard to be part of the team and perform better. So I think that is really great that you're doing that.
Well, and I'm glad you're doing that session next week, because I was a firm leader in 2009 when we went through the recession, and I know across the board that diverse people were impacted much more during that downturn than they ever have been. And so I'm hoping that law firm leaders and other leaders have learned from that and are thinking about things differently. The Mansfield rule is really great when it comes to making decisions in an upturn. We should think about the same type of rule applying in the downturn, that we're much more deliberate and conscious about these decisions with all of the factors in mind.
So true. Any final remarks from the three of you?
I love what you're doing, Monica. I think that your enhanced engagement during this time, and you're using everything you bring to the table to create more free offerings, in addition to, I know, all the work that you're doing where people are signing you up as a coach and stuff. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's more what the world needs. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Monica and Kathi and Matt, for what you're doing in your organizations. If anyone asks me, I would highly recommend you as people to work with and work alongside. And to all of the managers and team leaders who took the time to call in, I think that, for the community that I represent, which is kind of the pipeline and the early career attorney, it's certainly great to have people who care enough to want to learn, to want to improve, to want to put things in place to create better working environments for their teams. So thank you for your commitment to that.
Thank you so much, Matt, Kathi, and Danielle, for making yourselves available to be part of this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for including me, and double underline what Kathi and Danielle said. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, you guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.